All right, so what I got in my hand is the fuel level sender and pickup from my 1970 Envoy Epic. Well, not exactly usable. But here's the problem. Envoy pulled out of Canada in 1970. My car is in 1970, so you can imagine that parts are not the easiest thing to get a hold of, because I've got one of the only ones left in existence in Canada.
Unfettered, our idiot forged ahead. If he could not buy, then damn it, he'd make his own. And so he dug and scraped and dug some more.
Gotta be so careful, I don't want to damage this. I think all this goo is actually just pot metal. I thought this was Bakelite, but the more I'm scraping away, the more I think it's actually just the pot metal itself is just completely and utterly disintegrated.
Until eventually he had unearthed the rotten remains of the old resistance wire.
Right down here there's more pickup, so I'm gonna have to keep digging till I can get out, and that'll give me my resistance measurement for full tank and for empty tank, and then I can try and find something that will match that range. But this wire is so delicate to be so careful.
Turning to his trusty voltmeter, he attempted to get a reading off the crusty relic.
I'm gonna put one lead there, and then the other lead on the far end, and...
But it was to no avail.
Open. Here's a surprise.
He would have to continue digging, being ever so careful not to damage the brittle wire.
And I broke it.
Idiot.
I might be able to just get a measurement just off of this. I don't think it was actually attached to anything anymore anyways. Take a look at this thing. It's not exactly in the best shape. I need to clean this up better because right now there's so much corrosion and whatever the heck is on here that there's no way I can get a reading on this thing right now.
And so the freshly broken part was placed into a cap full of apple cider vinegar to soak. The seconds turned into minutes, and the minutes into hours. Slowly the years of neglect began to fall away, unveiling the treasures within.
Alright, so this pickup has been soaking in the vinegar for a little over an hour, and you can see it's already substantially cleaner than it was. Almost all of the stuff has actually come off of it. All the corrosion, all of the varnish. So I think this is probably good enough now actually to get a reading off of. Okay, I got my voltmeter set to ohms, and I'm going to put one lead right down on the end, and now if I draw this lead up, we should get a variable reading. And at full, we're looking about 52.5 ohms. So that means either I need to try and make a new piece to hold this and make an entirely new fuel sender, or I need to try and find a universal one that I can rob the components off of and make work in the Vauxhall.
Armed with this newfound information, it was time to enter the dark and evil world of online shopping. With the new sender unit en route from lands far away, our subject turned his attention to creating a new mounting plate. Using a computer to create the design, he would then carefully and painstakingly fabricate the new part by hand. Stop making me a liar. Once lazily completing the part on a CNC machine, he moved on to the next challenge of creating a fluid-tight mount for the pickup tube to pierce the new plate. After wasting seemingly an eternity overcomplicating the matter, he settled on cutting parts from the original sender's clogged pickup. And then, ensuring to use an analog caliper to look fancy on camera, he measured the tube and selected a drill bit. But not before rechecking with a digital caliper after remembering he has no idea how to use an analog one. Next, the part and bit were placed into the lathe. And absolutely nothing happened because the part is made of steel and not a block of cheese. So over to the drill press. Why he keeps trying to use that toy lathe is beyond me. With the fitting drilled out and filed smooth, a new pickup tube would be created by bending a length of 1/4-inch tubing and cutting to size. Being completely hopeless with a TIG welder, our subject chose to try solder the tube in place. The resulting joint quality exceeded his expectations so much that he chose to rip it apart and start again, conveniently neglecting to record igniting his workbench hutch ablaze. Though admittedly the new joint does appear somewhat superior. Feeling pleased with the pickup, the sender build was underway. Using a torch to help make the material more pliable, our builder cautiously, gingerly, gently, snapped the factory float bar in half. rendering it useless. Good grief. Fortunately for our subject, he found the remnants of a welding wire laying on the floor, which happened to be of the correct size to create a new bar. The wire would be bent around a socket to create a loop, and the original sender's float would be secured in place. It was now apparently time to try use math to figure out the mounting position and length of the level sender float. So back and forth he walked from the lift to the bench to the lift, and back again. Each time recording numbers and performing calculations. Of course, calculations are only as useful as the numbers that one inputs, and in this particular case, they were anything but correct. Now all that was left was to create a coupler from the small brass standoff found in the parts tin, using the toy lathe. Again? Good grief, that thing is a pile of shite. Somebody, get this man a proper lathe. With the coupler completed on the drill press, the float arm was soldered into place and it was time to start assembling the main structure. Using a precision hammer, the new sender was liberated from its mounting bracket and mocked up on the new plate. Once all of the locations for the new components were determined, the remaining holes were drilled into the plate. And this time actually by hand, in order to create a 6mm hexagonal hole for the sensor wire mount to pass through. It was decided the only logical option was extreme tool abuse. So using the vise, a 6mm Allen and hex socket were forced through the steel against their will. The end result was surprisingly good. Of course, the true enemy of good is not evil. No. The true enemy of good is better. And so our idiot lined up for one more pass from the opposing direction and successfully turned the perfectly good 6-point hole into a better 12-point mess. Now it was time to attach the sender to its new bracket. Oh, for Pete's sake. How does this guy get anything done? Now it was time to attach the sender to its new bracket for a second time. The electrical was installed by heating a nut and sinking it into the nylon fitting. UV cure epoxy was used to seal the metal from the elements, and the pickup tube was slid into place and bolted down. Finally, the bare metal was coated in gun bluing to give it a chemically blackened finish. Time to test. Well, the gauge moves, but our subject quickly realized this test probably should have been performed before even starting the project. Having a gauge that reads full at a quarter tank is rather dumb. Thankfully, a kind spirit reached out to him from a strange land. Canada. The spirit confirmed the gauge was in fact 0 to 30 ohms, and not the 0 to 50 originally determined from the sender. Of course, the fact the new sender was 0 to 100, and not the advertised 0 to 50 ohms, didn't much help the situation. Good thing he used math. Unable to make the sweep travel distance work, and having too much resistance in the new wire, the only option was to attempt to rewrap the new sender with the old wire. So with the finesse of a bomb disposal technician, he carefully unwound the original resistance wire, proving why bomb disposal tech is definitely not the field for him. Yet somehow he managed to save enough wire to achieve 0 to 30 ohms. Sweat pouring from his brow, our builder began to rewind the old wire onto the new backing. Millimeter by millimeter. Turn by turn. The wire found its way to its new home. But even once wound, he was not out of danger. Now the wire had to be secured in place. With teeth clenched, the wire was fed into the locating holes and the assembly installed into the housing. Carefully, the wires were placed into position and soldered into place. By some miracle, the finished product actually looked as intended. This time he would test the numbers on the bench. 1.5 to 30. Close enough. The urge to make it better is strong. But he fights off the alluring call of better and leaves the wire be. Connecting the sensor to the car's electrical and engaging the horrible door buzzer, he ran the sender through a full sweep. Finally, the gauge reads as it should. Almost. Returning to his calculations, he discards them in the trash and eyeballs the float arm into place with blindfolded accuracy. Then, with the stealth of a ninja, he silently made his way to the office to create a new gasket using his wife's vinyl cutter. The cutter is loud, and he is caught red-handed. tonight, he would be ordering her new cutter blades. And not the crappy ones. Giving up on the ninja way of life, he went back to installing the fuel sender. The old aluminum washers would first have to be annealed with a torch to ensure they would properly seal. Then, with the sender in place, the tank was lifted back up into position. Well, that would be the case had he not left a pile of wheels blocking the fuel filler hole.
Okay.
At last, with a fresh face full of rust, dirt, and spider webs, the fuel tank was mounted back under the trunk of the car. Now he could turn his attention to running new fuel lines and finally try start the engine after its 40-year slumber. It appears I stand corrected. Now he could turn his attention to the odd smell which suddenly filled the air. Something was leaking. It smells like gas. Ah yes. It seems the apprentice requires a diaper change. The fuel lines will have to wait. Follow along as our main character continues to make life much more complicated than it need be by pressing the subscribe button below. Until next time, farewell and good night.